Lake Orion, Michigan, October 1999. A petite librarian is about to become the center of a nightmare no one saw coming. To the outside world, Gail Fulton seemed to have it all: a devoted military husband, 2 loving children, and finally, after years of moving from base to base, the stable life she had always dreamed of. But behind closed doors, something sinister was brewing, and by the time the truth emerged, it would shake this quiet community to its core. To understand what happened to Gail, we need to go back to 1993, when her husband George retired from the military after 18 years of service. The Fulton family returned home to Corpus Christi, Texas, ready to begin a new chapter. George had served his country faithfully, and now it was time to build a civilian life. But the transition would prove far more difficult than anyone anticipated. George was looking for a job. He couldn't find one. Everyone wanted to help him, but George did not appear to want help. He believed that he shouldn't have to start at the bottom of any job. George wanted to start at the top. But nobody does that. Nobody walks into a civilian career after military service and immediately assumes a leadership position. The arrogance would prove to be a defining characteristic, one that would ultimately contribute to the destruction of his family. Finally, George landed the job he'd been waiting for, in insurance sales. But to take it, he would have to uproot his family once again, this time moving them nearly 1,500 miles north to Michigan. Ever the dutiful wife, Gail packed up their lives and moved the family to Lake Orion, a wealthy, idyllic community north of Detroit, where they could finally lay down roots after years of military relocations. George's new job meant he was often on the road, traveling for work and leaving Gail to manage the household alone. But now, for the first time in their marriage, it was Gail's turn to focus on what she wanted. She loved books. She loved reading. So Gail decided to go back to school and become a librarian. It was a dream she had nurtured for years, always putting it aside for the sake of her family. A few years after they moved to Michigan, she began working at the local library, the very place where her life would end. The first crack in this facade appeared when George's job brought him into contact with a woman named Donna Trapani. Donna owned a medical care company, and she hired George's firm to handle their paperwork, finances, taxes, everything. George started spending more and more time traveling to Florida, telling his family he needed to be there for work. At first, no one thought much of it. George had always traveled for his job, but looking back, investigators would identify this period as the beginning of a carefully orchestrated seduction not by George, but by the woman who would stop at nothing to make him hers. This wasn't a one-night stand. It wasn't a brief indiscretion. George and Donna carried on a full-blown affair for more than a year and a half. Then, 6 months before Gail's murder, something changed. George told police that he tried to end the affair. Perhaps guilt had finally caught up with him. Perhaps he realized he was about to lose everything. Whatever the reason, George attempted to walk away from Donna Trapani. But Donna wasn't about to let him go. She contacted George with shocking news that would pull him right back in. Donna claimed she was dying of cancer, and she was pregnant with George's child. She wanted to marry George. The desperation in that claim should have been a warning sign. This was a woman willing to fabricate terminal illness and pregnancy to keep a man. What else might she be willing to do? Then, on July 4th, 1999, just 3 months before Gail's murder, everything came to a head in the most bizarre and devastating way imaginable. Emily was out with friends on a boat on the lake, enjoying the holiday, when her cell phone rang. It was her mother, and she was crying.
And she tells me that she's walking home from this hotel she was at,
Where George had taken her for a meeting. But this wasn't any ordinary meeting. George had arranged for his wife and his mistress to meet face to face. Emily listened in disbelief as her mother explained what had happened. George had taken Gail to a local hotel where Donna Trapani was waiting. The 3 of them sat in a room together. Donna told Gail that she was pregnant with George's child and that she was dying of cancer. She had some letter from a doctor claiming to confirm her terminal diagnosis, a detail that struck investigators as highly unusual. Doctors don't typically give patients letters to walk around with saying they have terminal cancer. But the pregnancy and illness weren't the most shocking parts of Donna's proposal. She wanted Gail to grant George a divorce so the 2 of them could get married before the baby was born. Then, once Donna had died of her terminal illness, Gail and George would adopt the child, and they would remarry. The first thing that comes to mind is that this should be on Jerry Springer. How could anyone make such an offer? How could anyone even think about doing something so audacious, so cruel?
Donna is saying, just let me have him until I'm dead. That you've had him for all those years. Don't be so selfish. Let me have him for these last few months. And then Donna wanted to speak to my mother by herself. And so Donna and my mother were in the room alone together. And Donna told my mother, this won't end until one of us is dead.
Those words hung in the air like a curse. At the time, Gail probably dismissed them as the desperate ramblings of a woman losing her grip on reality. She had no way of knowing that Donna Trapani meant every word. When Emily heard what had happened, she was determined to confront the woman destroying her family. She went to the hotel herself. What she found there was deeply unsettling. I noticed there's this table with what I can only describe as a shrine to my father, Emily recalled. There were cards and little gifts and little things, and she's showing me she's picking them up. Read this. This is how much your father loves me. Read.
Showing me. She's picking up Shakir, read this. This is how much your father loves me. Read.
Emily was blown away by what she saw. The cards, the love letters, the accumulated evidence of a year and a half of secret passion.
I'm blown away because I never saw my father write such loving things to my mother,
She said. The realization was devastating. Donna was trying to convince Emily, hoping that if she could win over the daughter, she could win over the father. I think she was trying to convince me, to be able to convince my dad so that my dad would let us go because she only had a short time left. But something else struck Emily as wrong. She didn't look pregnant. I mean, she had a little bit of a stomach, but she didn't look far enough along. The inconsistency registered, but Emily was too overwhelmed to process it. And I'm just crying, she said. I can't even think. I'm overwhelmed. When Emily returned home, she found her mother in pieces. Gail was upset and crying, and the reason made Emily's blood boil. George didn't believe Gail when she said that Donna had threatened her. He just said, Donna was a nurse and she helped people, that she would never hurt anyone, Emily remembered. George was convinced Donna was pregnant and dying of cancer. He couldn't see past the manipulation.
And my dad, I remember, was just sitting on the couch with his, hand in his head like this, with the dark clouds over him. After 2 days, my dad swore he was coming back to us. He wanted my mother and the family back. So he wanted to pretend like everything was okay, but things were not okay.
Rejected, Donna returned to Florida. George recommitted to Gail and his family. Gail, guided by her deep Catholic faith, chose to stay in her marriage. When you're a Catholic, you don't get divorced, you marry for life. She stayed in the relationship for her children, even as the pain ate away at her soul. My mother never brought it up again, Emily said. We just went about our own lives, and it just never got discussed again. There's a lot that went on inside Gail during those final months. Her faith told her to forgive, to persevere, to honor her vows. But the betrayal never healed. My parents would argue a lot because my mother was upset, and rightly so, that my father was still talking to Donna, Emily said. George claimed he still had a working relationship and commitment he needed to fulfill. Gail was devastated by his continued contact with the woman who had tried to steal him away. What Gail didn't know, what no one in the family knew, was that Donna Trapani had no intention of letting George go. In her twisted mind, rejection was not an option. If she couldn't have George, no one would. And in the weeks following that July confrontation, Donna had already begun planning how to eliminate the only obstacle standing in her way. The countdown to murder had begun. Everything changed on a quiet evening in October 1999. Gail finished her shift at the library, the job she had worked so hard to get, the dream she had finally achieved after years of putting everyone else first. She gathered her things and walked out to the parking lot, ready to head home to her family. But when she reached her car, she discovered something was wrong. Her tire had been slashed.
She found that there was a problem with the vehicle, went back into the parking lot, and then she realized that someone had punctured her tire.
When she returned to a library, another vehicle pulled in front of her, and a male gets out of the vehicle. The grainy figure produces a handgun and aims it. And Gail's response is to flinch, to step back.
Gail went down with the first shot. The individual walked over to her and shot at least twice more into her body. He then turned around, quickly got back in the vehicle, and the vehicle left. Pretty conclusive that this was a setup, that she walked into an ambush.
The shooting occurred around a few minutes after 9 o'clock. Pretty conclusive that this was a setup, investigators noted. She walked into an ambush. As police processed the scene, one of the first things they did was an area canvass. There were no shell casings found. That meant either the shooter policed their brass, meaning they picked up any casings, or they used a revolver, which wouldn't eject casings in the first place. Either way, it suggested planning and experience. Gail's husband George and 17-year-old son Andrew arrived at the library after receiving a call that Gail had been hurt. Obviously, the reality was much more grievous than that. Detectives made careful note of each family member's reaction to the news. Andrew's response was very distraught and very expected for a teenager who had just learned his mother was dead. The raw grief was appropriate, understandable, human. But George's response to his wife's murder? It was a little bizarre. The husband didn't seem to be very emotional about the situation, investigators noted. The detachment was striking. Here was a man who had just lost his wife of more than 2 decades, the mother of his children, and he seemed oddly composed. Oftentimes, when there's a death, investigators look at the spouse as the first place to go. They begin to examine what's going on in the family, what tensions might exist, what motives might be hiding beneath the surface of domestic normalcy. George and Andrew were taken to the local sheriff's office for an interview. Investigators also called Gail's 19-year-old daughter Emily and asked her to come down to the station. When investigators asked George where he was that evening, his answer was precise and detailed. He said he had arrived home from work, and then around 8:30, he received a phone call from Donna Trapani, his boss at the time. The obvious alibi in this case was that George was on the phone with Donna when Gail was shot. He was not at the library. He couldn't have pulled the trigger. But that seemed a little too coincidental that a spouse is murdered in a parking lot while her unfaithful husband is on the phone with his mistress. The timing was almost too perfect, as if it had been choreographed. This kind of made us raise an eyebrow, investigators noted. When detectives asked George the obvious question, what was the state of his marital relationship? Were there any problems? He responded that everything was fine. He had no idea who would do this, but in a separate room, detectives were getting a very different story from George and Gail's son, Andrew. Andrew said he came back to the house around 8:30 and noticed his father was in the basement, working and talking to someone on the phone. The 17-year-old put 2 and 2 together and figured out who his father was speaking to. Then Andrew revealed something his father had deliberately concealed. George had been having an affair. It raises a lot of red flags in terms of why George is being untruthful, investigators noted. Did he have a hand in this? What is he hiding? When Emily arrived at the station, she was still unaware of the tragedy that had befallen her family.
I get to the station, and my brother's there, and I could tell he'd been crying. Police officer kneels in front of me, and she says, "Honey, I'm sorry, but there's been an accident. Your mother's dead." Right away, I start yelling, "That bitch murdered my mom. She killed my mom."
Emily immediately started mentioning the name Donna. Donna did this, she insisted. For investigators, this was highly significant. The daughter of the victim, before anyone had even mentioned suspects or theories, was pointing the finger at a specific person with absolute certainty. Emily proceeded to tell investigators everything she knew about her father's relationship with Donna, the affair, the hotel meeting, the pregnancy and cancer claims, and most importantly, the threat Donna had made to her mother. "This won't end until one of us is dead." The investigators asked George about Donna Trapani and whether she was potentially someone they should be looking at or talking to. His response was emphatic. "She had no involvement in this. She is not that type of person." George was defending the woman who may have killed his wife. Whether this was genuine belief in Donna's innocence or something more sinister, investigators couldn't yet determine. George was a suspect, which is why investigators asked him to take a polygraph. When George was pressed on this, he got angry and stormed out of the station. George had a solid alibi he didn't pull the trigger, but investigators were convinced he had something to do with this, even if they couldn't prove it yet. It was now 1 a.m, the night of the murder, and detectives wanted answers. They couldn't wait for morning. They needed to talk to the woman at the center of this web. They called Donna Trapani's home phone in Florida, nearly 1,000 miles away. She picked up. Donna confirmed she was in Florida and that she and George had been on a phone call at the time of the murder. She provided the alibi George needed. She confirmed the timeline George had given. But when it was revealed that Gail had actually been killed, the deputy noted something strange in his report. Donna did not seem surprised.
The deputy noted in his report she did not seem surprised.
A police agency in Michigan is calling you in Florida, asking about a phone conversation with your employee slash relationship lover. Why would you not ask? Why are you asking me this?
2 days after the murder, George returned to the police station to collect Gail's belongings, and he made an odd request that would haunt investigators for years. If, in fact, there comes a time you want to place me into custody, please don't do it at an airport. Don't do it in front of my family. You call, and I will meet with you. Why would you expect to be arrested if you didn't do anything? Why would you say that? When George said those things, it made investigators wonder, even if he wasn't an active participant, was he somehow complicit in the murder of his wife? Did he know what was coming and do nothing to stop it? Meanwhile, in Gail's hometown of Corpus Christi, Texas, the news of her murder was devastating the family and friends who had known her all her life. Gail's sister-in-law received a call in the middle of the night.
I remember the kids coming into the room because I was screaming, just screaming. The tragedy of all of it.
For me, it's like part of my heart was ripped out to be shot and killed like that, execution style, for a little tiny woman that would never expect anything bad to happen to her. It's unbelievable to me.
1 week after the murder, friends and family gathered in Corpus Christi to mourn and celebrate Gail's life. All funerals are emotional, but when you lose someone unexpectedly, violently, it becomes nearly impossible to reconcile the pain. It was decided there would be a closed casket ceremony.
Seeing the gaping hole in her head that they tried to fill, it just looked so painful, so awful, and the expression frozen on her face. She was in pain when she died. I don't care what anyone says. I could just feel the pain etched on her face.
As family members were arranging flowers, preparing to say goodbye to a woman they loved, George came blasting through the room. "You need to get out," he demanded. "I need to spend time with my wife." The audacity was staggering. One relative's internal response was immediate. "Oh, really? Now you decide you want to spend time with your wife?" George acted like he was the victim in all of this. Back in Michigan, investigators were working tirelessly to identify the killer captured on that grainy surveillance footage. The video resolution was too low to make out any identifiable features of the shooter or the people in the car. But detectives noticed something that might prove useful. There was something defective in the taillight, investigators observed. Usually, even in black and white footage, you'll see a gray cast of the taillight. But that particular taillight had a white cast, which would be indicative that the taillight was broken. It was the kind of clue that could help identify the car if they could find it. Investigators took the video to the GM Tech Center and had engineers analyze the tape. After careful examination, they determined that the vehicle was a fairly new Chevrolet Malibu, 4-door model. Now that begins to whittle things down, investigators noted. Malibu is kind of a broad stroke, but a newer model Chevy Malibu with a broken taillight in a specific spot that's a little more granular. Investigators put out a bolo be on the lookout for any Malibus matching that description. But by now, 5 weeks had passed since the murder. The car could be anywhere, hundreds, even thousands of miles away. Donna was in Florida. George was at his home. The critical question remained: who was in that car? Then, in November, after more than a month with no progress, there was a major break in the case. A confidential informant came forward and contacted the Oakland County Sheriff's Office from a phone number in Florida. The tipster had information on the homicide, information that would blow the investigation wide open. The informant put investigators onto 2 additional personalities, a woman named Sybil Paget and a man named Patrick Alexander. According to the tipster, Sybil was his ex-girlfriend.
She and her current boyfriend, Patrick Alexander, were looking for a gunman to do a hit in Michigan.
The implication was staggering. Did somebody else get contracted to murder Gail in that parking lot? Could it have been Sybil, Patrick, and another unknown person in the car that night? Detectives quickly learned that Sybil and Patrick lived in Defuniak Springs, Florida. A deeper look into Sybil's background revealed a shocking connection that tied everything together. Donna Trapani was Sybil Paget's employer. The pieces were starting to fall into place. Donna had access to someone willing to find a hitman. Donna had motive. She wanted Gail out of the way so she could have George. And Donna had been on the phone with George at the exact moment Gail was murdered, providing both of them with alibis. Investigators started surveillance on Sybil, and almost immediately, they found what they were looking for: a Chevy Malibu with a broken brake light, parked right in Sybil's driveway. "You happen to have a Malibu in the driveway with a broken tail light," investigators noted. "The odds of that being a coincidence are extraordinarily high." It matched the car that was involved in the homicide in Michigan, and when they dug deeper, they discovered that the car had been rented by Donna for Sybil. Bingo. They got something. Detectives reached out to Sybil Paget and arranged an informal meeting at a local hotel. Initially, she denied any involvement. She said she had nothing to do with it, no connection to it whatsoever. And then her story began to unravel. Within a short period of time, Sybil admitted the truth. She had been contacted by Donna Trapani and asked if she knew anybody who could set up a hit to kill somebody out of state. Donna offered to pay for it. Sybil quickly stated that she was not the shooter, that she had been coerced into participating.
I used to smoke pot, and she said she was going to turn me in for smoking pot.
If you didn't do what?
If I didn't go kill Gail, if she said she was going to take my babies from me and I'd never see them again.
She claimed she was in fear that if she didn't cooperate with Donna, bad things would happen to her. But fear or not, Sybil had been an active participant in a murder conspiracy.
She said, so I can't live without George. She said, George called and said he wishes Gail was dead. And she said, I feel like the only way me and George are going to be together is if Gail's dead.
What Sybil revealed painted a picture of obsession and madness that defied comprehension. Donna had told Sybil how her heart was broken, how she was pregnant with George's child, how he wouldn't do the right thing and leave his wife.
There was discussion about making this look like a suicide, making this look like a random act of violence. They were premeditating as to how they were going to effectively get away with the homicide.
What did she ask you for?
She asked me to mix up some poison and have her eat the poison, drink the poison.
Sybil revealed that there had been 2 trips to Michigan. The first trip, with just Sybil and Patrick, was a reconnaissance mission. They followed Gail, watching her movements, learning her routines, looking for an opportunity to catch her alone. But they never had a chance to get her isolated. It was a failed effort, and Donna was furious about that failure. It amped her up even more. After that unsuccessful attempt, Donna tried to find someone online to kill Gail. When that didn't work out either, Sybil introduced a new player into the conspiracy. His name was Kevin Ouellette, an out-of-work truck driver with a lengthy criminal record. Kevin was someone willing to do this kind of work for money, and so now he was in the mix. Investigators finally had their full party in the car. According to Sybil, Donna offered Kevin $5,000 to kill Gail. He readily accepted. Then Sybil, Patrick, and Kevin Ouellette headed back to Michigan for a second attempt. This time, they wouldn't fail.
Dawn had made him itinerary.
How did she do that?
She gave him a picture of Gail, a description of Gail, and wrote on a piece of paper, Gail's work hours, where Gail lived.
This was Donna Trapani's plan to kill Gail Fulton. Kevin Ouellette was the gunman. Sybil and Patrick were accomplices, and Donna was the puppet master pulling all the strings from 1,500 miles away while conveniently on the phone with George, establishing alibis for both of them. Investigators tracked down Sybil's boyfriend Patrick and brought him in for questioning. Patrick came across as a 19-year-old kid who had been promised easy cash. All he had to do was drive. He hadn't fully comprehended the gravity of what he was participating in until it was too late. The next phase was to execute a search warrant at Sybil's house. What investigators found there was a roadmap to murder, literally. A roadmap to Michigan, with the route carefully marked. They also found a series of newspaper articles about the homicide in Lake Orion that Sybil had collected. It opened up everything, but George was still a suspect. Investigators didn't know if he had prior knowledge of this plot. He may have aided in the intelligence providing Gail's schedule, telling them when she would be at the library, making sure she would be alone. While detectives worked to determine George's level of involvement, they turned back to the evidence found at Sybil's house. One detective had a brilliant idea. Why not dust the map for fingerprints? Most people aren't aware that you can take fingerprints off of paper. It's almost as good as glass. What they discovered was devastating for the defendants. All 4 conspirators' fingerprints were on the map: Donna Trapani, Sybil Paget, Patrick Alexander, and Kevin Ouellette. At one time, all of them had been handling that map as they plotted the conspiracy to commit murder. They had gathered together, bent over that paper. And what about George? Did his fingerprints appear on that map? They did not. All of the actual participants who were in Michigan, in that parking lot, said George wasn't involved. Even Donna, who tried to blame him when her own situation became desperate, couldn't provide evidence of his participation. Donna was fabricating things from the beginning, investigators concluded. There is no evidence to show that George was involved in his wife's murder.
Yes, he cheated on my mom. He was unfaithful, but he didn't kill her.
Investigators still needed to track down the alleged gunman. Kevin Ouellette was on a long haul out of state for work, moving from place to place in his truck. The FBI located him in Connecticut, where he was placed under arrest and taken into custody. Meanwhile, detectives went to confront the alleged mastermind herself. They arrived at Donna Trapani's home in Florida and were invited inside. At this point in the investigation, the detectives knew something crucial. If Donna's claims were true, her pregnancy should be significantly advanced by now. She should be showing. Investigators informed Donna that Sybil and Patrick were already in custody. Thinking on her feet, Donna immediately began to spin herself as the victim in all of this. She claimed she was truly pregnant, truly in love with George Fulton, and truly had a terminal illness. She was being set up. She insisted. Donna told investigators a remarkable story. She had confided in Sybil about how her heart was broken, how she was pregnant with George's child and he wouldn't do the right thing. According to Donna, Sybil had taken it upon herself to go up to Michigan with this group of people and kill Gail Fulton for her without Donna's knowledge or consent. Poor Donna, in her telling, was truly the victim in all of this. But then, something happened that exposed Donna's lies once and for all. During the interview, a cat in Donna's residence jumped up onto her belly and walked across her stomach. Donna didn't flinch. And as the cat walked across what should have been a pregnant woman's body, the deputies noticed something impossible.
The deputy noted that what should be a pregnant body now has indentations left across her stomach.
That typically doesn't happen to a pregnant woman's stomach.
Detectives decided they had sufficient evidence to make an arrest, and when they took Donna into custody, the final piece of her deception was revealed. They pulled a bunch of placemats out of her waistline props she had been using to appear pregnant. Investigators contacted Donna's doctor. There was no documentation that Donna was pregnant, and there was no diagnosis of cancer. The cancer was fake. The pregnancy was fake. Every claim Donna had made to manipulate George, to guilt Gail, to justify her obsession, all of it was fabricated. Donna was the ringleader, investigators concluded. She was the puppet master in all of this. Donna had Gail killed. Now they had to prove it in court. When Kevin Ouellette took the stand, he described the murder in chilling, matter-of-fact detail that made the horror of that October night viscerally real. She backed out of her spot, started driving away, and I guess that's when she noticed that she had a flat tire, and she turned around.
Started driving away, and I guess that's when she noticed that she had a flat tire, and she turned around. As she got there, I got out and I shot her and told Patrick to go.
The testimony of Patrick Alexander and Kevin Ouellette became crucial to proving that Donna Trapani was an active participant in the homicide, not merely an innocent bystander who got caught up in someone else's crime. Under Michigan law, an accomplice is held to the same level of accountability as the person who actually pulls the trigger. The person who plans and pays for a murder is just as guilty as the person who commits it. The evidence was overwhelming. The fingerprints on the map, the rental car tied to Donna, the witnesses who testified about Donna's requests to find a hitman. The complete fabrication of her pregnancy and illness, the threat she had made to Gail just 3 months before. This won't end until one of us is dead. Both women were found guilty of premeditated first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Donna Trapani, Sybil Paget, and Kevin Ouellette were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. They will die behind bars. Patrick Alexander, who cooperated with investigators and testified against the others, was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Before sentencing, Gail's loved ones finally had their chance to speak. They stood before the court and shared their memories of who Gail truly was, not the victim in a murder case, but a person, a mother, a wife, a woman of faith.
I miss her smile. I know that she had so much more to give to the world, to her grandchildren that she never knew.
In the years following the trial, Emily's relationship with her father became complicated in ways that defied easy resolution.
Now, the relationship with my father, it is more at a distance. I know that there's a lot of pain there in the past, but I try to not focus on that and instead see him for where he is now and what he can offer now.
Morally and ethically, I hold George responsible. I hold George responsible for all the pain that he had Gail endure.
George Fulton was never charged with any crime. The evidence did not support the conclusion that he knew about or participated in the plot to kill his wife, but he brought Donna Trapani into their lives. He maintained the affair even after he knew how destructive it was. He defended Donna to his own wife, dismissing Gail's fears about the woman who had threatened her life. He didn't pull the trigger, but he loaded the gun. Emily turned her pain into purpose. She became a life coach and public speaker, using her mother's story to help other women recognize the signs of emotional and mental abuse before it's too late. Emily believes her mother stayed with George because of her Catholic faith and other deeply held beliefs about marriage and commitment. But she wants other women to know that those beliefs don't have to be prisons. I think my mother had to make the decision that she did to stay with my father based on her Catholic faith or other limiting beliefs, Emily reflected. But I want people to realize that your beliefs can change. Faithful, loving, and ever forgiving, Gail Fulton was, in many ways, the perfect wife. This case reminds us that evil can wear a pleasant face. It can hide behind professions of love, claims of illness, performances of vulnerability. Donna Trapani, Sybil Paget, and Kevin Ouellette will spend the rest of their lives in prison. They will never again walk free. They will never again have the opportunity to destroy another family the way they destroyed the Fultons. That is not healing, but it is something.